right, we're connecting. You should see a sign saying you're being recorded now. So welcome everybody to our Halloween seminar. And thank you very much to Marian for offering us this talk. So I haven't really prepared a formal introduction to Marian. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself, but Marian is professor in the newly named School of Arts and Creative Technologies at the University of York and has been very involved in the Digital Creativity Labs project that's been at York for some years. So over to you, Marian, to perhaps tell us a little bit more about yourself before you start.
Thank you very much, Helen. Just a little correction. It's also newly formed, not just newly named, because we joined two departments: music and theatre, film, television, and interactive media. And I just put some. How on earth do I get out of this? Exit. I touched my screen by mistake. Yes, so as it is Halloween, my great uncle is Dracula, because I come from Transylvania. And this is the night when I reconnect with him every year. So I look forward to the night falling. Apart from being that nephew of a vampire, I started as a computer scientist in Romania. I worked in, I don't know if anyone here knows even the name, numerical methods in computer science. So you just, rather than solve differential equations symbolically, oh, thank you, Michael and Liz, they nod vehemently. So that's something I've done for 4 years. Then as a lecturer in Romania, then I moved to the UK, where I started a PhD in artificial intelligence at Brunel University, working in intelligent design assistance. This is the 90s, and this was a very popular topic at the time. And then I moved to Goldsmiths, and I got my first lectureship at Goldsmiths College in the Department of Computing, where I began to connect with the media arts. And the rest is history from there. I kind of moved my professional personality towards the arts. And then in 2013, I joined the University of York, to take a chair in interactive media, to actually bring technology to a then Department of Media Arts, Theatre, Film and Performance, I should say, Theatre, Film and Television it was at the time. And I think I have contributed to actually York developing creative technologies into a new school, and now that's recognized in the title. I have been and still am the director of Digital Creativity Labs, which started as an EPSRC project, and I hope it will remain a permanent entity at the University of York. And today I want to talk about interactive storytelling, object-based media, and kind of try to bring some of the challenges to user experience design that I've identified over the years. And this is our team, some of our team that worked in object-based media. So the things that I'm going to present today are not mine, they are a collective. These people, together with others, Mike Armstrong from BBC, Michael Armstrong from BBC is here, and he has also been a keen supporter of our work, and we collaborated a lot with the BBC team in object-based media. Our research concerns technology development as well as the development of artistic form. The two are intertwined, and we try to not separate them, as we think that's the best methodological approach. A few points of introduction. What is interactive mediated storytelling? It's also known as adaptive mediated storytelling, or responsive or personalized. And essentially, it is a story that can react to a context. The story written or embedded into an object, then removed from any authorial control, and then let free, and then that story can adapt or respond or can be interacted with. It is easy to define, and it's also easy to see metaphors, but it is very hard, or has been extremely hard, to find meaningful examples to this new form of expression. So for a long time, it remained a speculation. People talked about it in generic terms, but when the question was, can we see anything meaningful? The answer would be no. And probably that's not surprising with a new area of research. However, from kind of 2014, 2015 onwards, the field has become strong, and we got a good collection of significant exemplars in various genres. Starting from immersive theater, Karen is a production made by Blast Theory. This is a group from Bristol, in collaboration with the University of Nottingham and the National Theatre, Welsh National Theatre. It uses smartphones for its delivery. It's told over days, so it's kind of episodic, just punctual, but an very interesting example of an immersive, of an interactive story. Games have been pioneers, and they, from the games, we get the concept of narrative games. There are very, very, very many examples at the moment. Some are narrative, some aren't that narrative, or within this category, but in case you're not a games researcher, I highly recommend it.
Marian, can I just interrupt for a minute? Your sound is
audio is problematic.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for that.
No, that's okay.
I will try a remedy.
Right.
Let me see if I can. Is it better now?
That's much better. Yes.
Much better. Oh, I'm sorry for that. It does happen. I'm a media person, as you can see.
It's like HCI people can never get the interaction right. So.
Yeah, that's me. So yes, so her story, a simple concept, but really immersive and an excellent story, winner of many awards. Interactive documentaries is another genre that has flourished in the space of interactive storytelling. A very good example I'd recommend, Do Not Track, which allows you to interact with the story, but at the same time it looks on your machine, takes information about you, and then displays that or uses that in the argument with you. So makes the argument more really more persuasive. And last but not least, interactive film, dramatic productions. The best exemplar, I would say, is Bandersnatch, not necessarily because of the concept, but because of the reach. Netflix have published and distributed Bandersnatch, a movie written by Charlie Brooker and directed by David Slade in December 2018. So by that, I want to say we are now in the midst of interactive storytelling. There is enough there to persuade that interactive storytelling is here to stay, and it's worth researching it. However, new media such as 360 video, virtual reality, augmented reality is inherently interactive. So whether we want it or not, if we tell stories there, we have to consider interaction. So it is not anymore an opportunity, but it's also an absolute strong requirement. What is object-based media? This is a term coined by BBC. And the definition, I believe, is simple, is written on the screen. It defines composite digital objects which are assembled automatically from smaller elements of content, the objects themselves, such as video, audio, graphics, text, etc., taking into account contextual information, that is, and also including direct input from the viewers. So it's the ability to automatically craft something at the time of experience, or configure it beforehand, but automatically. That is the core trait of object-based media. Object-based media, with that generic definition, has very, very many significant aspects in which people research. For example, how do you deliver to scale? But the research that we've done at the University of York in Digital Creativity Labs concerns the ability of using OBM for storytelling. So that's essential. We use OBM for storytelling. And we focus on two types of content, audio and video, or more generally, if you wish, on recorded content. It's not generated at the time of storytelling, it is recorded. And that gives a clear steer for our research. For those who, so actually we're looking into interactive film. Now, for those who do not know the basic process of producing a film, here it is, and I'm sure film critics will jump through the roof saying, that's such a simplified workflow. But anyway, let's look at it. You have an idea. The idea is then written, then designs, costumes, things are, then sets, costumes are designed. Then we go into production when the footage is filmed. All that footage is then sent into post-production for color correction, visual effects, and more importantly, for the story to be crafted out of these clips and placed into a long narration into a narration, a linear narration that then becomes the film, and then that's distributed either in cinemas or television or what have you. So it's a kind of clear linear production workflow. Now, when I say object-based media for film, I'm placing the emphasis very much on post-production, because in post-production, in editing, we take the clips, put them end to end, and like that, we get the movie. Now, if we are to have some automation, this process inherently has to be automatic. It cannot be done by a human if the story is to adapt in this manner. So clearly our focus is on editing, but we cannot remove entirely the connections with the other parts of the workflow. And often, I'm going to jump ahead a bit now, often in our research, we suffered by not having good writers, or not consider, I beg your pardon, by not considering writing as a primary aspect of the research process. But we have to keep the focus on post-production. So I'm going to move on. So I've discussed interactive film, object-based media, and said a few things about the film production process. There are two key challenges to user experience design in OBM for film. One, to devise natural representations and tools that can capture complex narrative structures, complex logics, the recipe by which the content is automatically assembled at viewing time. And also to devise natural means for interacting with the story itself. The first one concerns the creators, and we want it to be as much as possible story independent, because we want reusable representations, reusable tools. The second one is at the interface with the audiences and is very much story specific. And let's start with the first challenge. This is a picture from Bandersnatch, and on the left there is a deconstruction of the actual story structure. This became a game. Many people tried to reverse engineer the actual structure of the story, but it is alleged that Charlie Brooker himself said, "I'm glad I did it, but never again." The complex was so the process was so complicated, and the diagrams and the representations were so sophisticated that it really took a lot of sweat from the production team. In branching, but this is what I want to say here, is that the state of the art currently in interactive film is the branching narrative. And in a branching narrative, the structure is represented two-dimensionally as a graph. The nodes of the graph are media objects. It is a simplified definition, but essentially it is correct. The graph represents, the nodes of the graph represents media objects, elements of content, and connections between nodes represent progression pathways in the way the story is told, in the way the clips, the elements of content are shown on screen. And they are conditional, so depending on, say, some interaction, they are valid or not. The pathway is possible to be followed or not. That is the essential representation scheme used more or less across the field. What we present through OBM, or what we actually developed, is a mechanism through which we separate the story logic from the media objects. So in branching narratives, you have media objects connected in pathways. Here, we separate them, and we develop representation means through which we aim to better capture the logic of interactive storytelling. We critique the branching narrative model in that it quickly becomes awfully complex. Hence, it is very time consuming and very hard to author and very prone to errors. In contrast, we pose, and we haven't proven the point yet, but I think inherently we have shown signs of truth, that our representation scheme, being more compact, is more effective and less prone to error, and also easier to test and debug. Of course, to that point, I'll come back later, because it's also harder, because it is more complex. So the way we do this is that in our approach, media objects, clips or audio clips, video clips, graphics are annotated with labels that represent their meaning and their function in the story. And then we also have a set of recursive aggregation structures through which we instruct the machine how they could be connected. For those who like a bit of computer science, this is the object-oriented model of our object-based media data model. There's a bit of a mouthful here. It's object-oriented model, object-based media. The two paradigms actually overlap a bit. The main point I want to make here is that the model is recursive. So everything is a narrative object in our representation, and then every structure combines narrative objects, and this recursiveness is the most, it provides the representation a lot of power, but at the same time poses significant computational challenges when we are to reason with such models. Each of the specific objects that I listed before have their own further representation mechanisms. For example, for atomic objects, we have playout properties that instruct the machine how the content is to be rendered. atomic objects also provide interaction variables, which then get instantiated at runtime and used in reasoning. The branching object is more or less what I tagged earlier as branching narratives, but we have selection objects where we can have dynamic content, rules stating which content to be selected for playout, and another very important aggregation mechanism, layered objects that instruct the machine how to reason and how to synchronize elements of content such that the story flows continuously and without hiccups. I do not have time here to go into details regarding these structures, but I'm going to illustrate what kind of productions we've put together using them. A big challenge to user experience design coming from these representations is their visualizations. How do we make them accessible to non-computer science specialists? It is an ongoing problem. It is a very difficult one. We have adopted we have put together some solutions. They do work, but as I'll say later, the space is still the space still requires research. How do we do it? We build models, not just sketches. We build working models because we want producers and creatives to actually engage with the interfaces and stretch them and understand their functionality. In Digital Creativity Labs, we had a software called Cutting Room, which we built in the around 2017, 2018. It was an HTML Java based tool. It was brilliant at the time. We thought that we kind of nailed the solution and it would be deployable in any web browsers, therefore platform independent. Hurrah, we thought, yes, that's it. But then as soon as we started to insert elements of functionality that required computationally intensive processes, we realized that this was not a good line of work and we had to kill it. And then we moved to another solution. We built both the background reasoner, the narrative engine, as well as the interface in Unity as a specific resource. Actually, I'm sorry, I have some work done in the house. It's the second time someone knocks at the door and I just can't take it. They don't get my message. So I do apologize for these hiccups, hesitation in my presentation. That's the joy of working from home. What I wanted to illustrate here is our solution to visualizing the recursive structure. We give creators the ability to go in and out the aggregation structures and visualize the content of each aggregation structure separately in another window. Window management becomes a nightmare, but this was really the quickest and the easiest solution we could put in place. So for example, here you see A is actually a structured object that represents this graph on the left. And then on this graph, we have the beginning element B, one of the layers there, that is a layered structure. One of the layer is actually a group of clips that is contained in another structure, and so on and so forth. So you just double click, go in, and then come out, and that's how you visualize this three-dimensional space. There are further challenges to the UX community regarding designing the tools and representations. As I said earlier, we looked essentially only on the structures that describe the aggregation, the way the clips will be aggregated in real time at the time of viewing. But we need a lot of support earlier on in the process. You would remember my workflow, in particular in writing the story. And there are bits of software that support writing interactive stories, but again, they are very much based on a kind of branching model. We could use exactly the same interface to kind of sketch a structure in which the author, the cutting room interface, to sketch a structure in which then the authors write, but we have not yet tested it with writers. So we're yet to do this research and see whether they need more or less. I'm not sure how, because there's not a one-to-one correspondence between the way you write the interactive piece and then the way you shoot it and represent it through audiovisual media. In inverted commas, terms borrowed from programming, debugging and testing are now real issues in interactive storytelling. These are spaces that have only clear materializations at runtime, at viewing time. And you need to understand whether you may generate cacophonies, whether you may generate harmful content. Everything is emerging at the time of writing. And the more ambitious you are with regards to the complexity of the story space, the higher the chance to hit something bad in your storytelling is. So we are considering, but are just in the process of designing and thinking about them, intelligent queries. For example, can these two elements of content be ever juxtaposed to avoid, say, messages sent through that juxtapositions? And also elements of intelligent navigation, and allow the author to place themselves in the story space and go in and out and jump, move forward, move backwards, all very difficult to do in a non-linear space, easy to do in a linear space. And then, of course, there is this close link between crafting the interactive space, but and also producing the footage, which is a much tighter interdependence, is not linear anymore. And as you start to iterate, you need to connect the two processes. So scheduling for production is yet another challenge. And these are all kind of the interface with the creator. Therefore, they concern the user experience design community. And a conclusion I'd like to state here from the work we've done with creatives, the way in which this research is carried out has been very expensive for us, at least, and I think it is inherently expensive, because if you are to work with tools, with functional tools, you have to add a lot of mundane functionality to it to make it usable. Otherwise, it falls on little things, you know, visualizing a clip. You have too many on the screen. So all those mundane elements consume a lot of software development process, and you have to pay for it. It needs a high level of robustness. You can't just always be above the shoulder of a producer. You have to give them to the community of creatives, and let them experience them and experiment with them. So they need a pretty high level of robustness. Again, a very big overhead on software development. And also they need significant training and time for creators. I've started with these structures in 2003, almost 20 years ago. And all the creative people that I worked with needed a lot of guidance. Even after a year of conversation, they would still come with basic questions back to me. So it is a very intensive training effort. And that's not necessarily due to the drawbacks of the tools, I would say. and the lack of training material, but it is because it is a new way of thinking for them, and you have to facilitate that new way of thinking together with the tool. The tool disconnected doesn't quite do that. So not an easy research space, but we've made some progress. And again, I should acknowledge Michael here. BBC have built also a very lovely set of tools that they have made available to the community. Very briefly to touch, and the time is flowing, to touch on artistic form and how we dealt with the development of actually new interactive stories. I have 3 examples that I'm going to give, and probably I won't go into as much detail as I wanted to do. The challenge that we have here is to devise natural and ideally transparent interactions which help the storytelling. Essentially, you don't want them to be just pushed. They should help with the way the story is being told, and to give audiences a greater sense of engagement through interaction. Not an easy challenge when you don't know what you're doing. The model of interactive storytelling is somewhat easier to understand in the context of a documentary. Documentary is factual, and often elements that are recounted inspire our imagination and allow us to think, oh, I'd like to know more about that. Oh, that's quite interesting. Or they say, actually, I know that, I read about it, move on. I'm not interested, or I'm not interested. So this simple model of more or less in the context of a documentary, we explored with a golden age, a documentary on the Renaissance in England, where there are various themes, the Armada, architecture, the church, the Queen. There's quite a few storylines through more or less the same content. So what we did, we tagged our elements of content with their relevance to each theme, and then we exposed themes gradually in the storytelling and allowed the viewer with just the remote control to say plus, more or less interest when certain themes were listed on screen. And the story just rolled and rolled and rolled. And we also had a stop soon button. Of course, you can just switch off the telly, but you could also have a stop soon when the story threads that were weaved were kind of purposely ended and not just bang. So that is a golden age. I've done this work in collaboration with Illuminations in London with the director John Wyver in 2006, 2007, 2008. Another example from the past was an interactive soap opera episode. We've done this with the equivalent of BBC in Finland. And it was an episode that we broadcast 12 times, the same episode broadcast 12 times, which responded to viewer interaction. The interaction was aggregated, so viewers would send text messages to a number. We would extract these text messages with a granularity of 3 to 4 minutes, analyze the text, and take decision on how the story was to evolve later. It was broadcast, so just one thread, but with hundreds elements of feedback every 2-3 minutes from the audience. And we got 500,000 no, yes? Oh, I don't remember the number. No, we did. It is 500,000. I wanted to say 500,000 is Finland, but no, 10%. Finland is about 5 million people. And over 12 episodes, we reached 500,000 people. And this was before Bandersnatch. And I challenge Bandersnatch. This is more sophisticated than what Netflix did in a time when the back channel was not present in television, and also when rendering for broadcast quality in real time was a huge challenge, which my team didn't solve. That was BT, but we worked on the story structure. So yeah, a success story in 2016. Started at Christmas and then went into New Year's Eve 2017. And a more recent one, we produced with our newer tool a shorter installation. This was viewed as an installation called "What is Love?" A dramatic story between two young people who live in different parts of the world, and whose relationship is maintained through an intelligent video conferencing system. So you have both the Zoom, as well as a bit of social media, as well as the AI hero, which acts like a butler to Amelia, who is the woman protagonist. It's a lovely story. I don't have time to tell you the story here, but what I want to say is that we envisaged this to be a blend of interactive story and social media. The interaction mechanism was social media. We staged in the storytelling posts from Amelia's followers. Amelia is a dancer, and she takes pictures of herself and videos, and even makes live broadcasts from her phone wherever she goes. She needs that popularity. She has a huge number of followers, and the followers, or if from the social media, we get reactions to her actions, and then we as viewers agree or disagree. That's all we could implement. Unfortunately, again, the whole production costed £40,000. Our ambition, however, was higher. We thought that we as you as viewers have the ability to write in real-time posts as response to what is staged online. And our expectation was that through that, we may even be able to start conversation threads between the viewers themselves, cluster their reactions, and entice them to stay in the story and debate and take action and reaction on Amelia's decisions, which in turn would have posed for us the question of how do you keep them in that space without having to shoot a lot of footage? How do you ensure that they stay connected in the storytelling through interaction without actually spending millions in content production? As I said, that question still remains active. We are yet to continue that research. Unfortunately, the time and the money we had didn't allow us to answer that question. But this one too was seen by about 900 people at York Mediale in 2018. It was a success, but I must say here in this community, normally people who come to see such pioneering productions are also biased in favor. They are supporters to some extent. So we should, and we do not always take absolutely literally all the accolades that are written, because these are our supporters. So that's not a robust evaluation. Nevertheless, we write it in ref impact case studies, obviously. So to summarize, there was a simple, more or less mode of interaction with the story via the remote control. Simple device, simple interaction mode could be very, very meaningful and powerful. Interacting through SMS unstructured text is very comfortable, and with good text processing could again be very powerful. And I still think, and I want to put a project proposal to see how social media could be better connected with curated storytelling, as I think that's a really valuable potential line of research. There's more or less the same methodology challenge here as well, but even more complex perhaps. In order to put these stories together, you need enthusiast writers and producers to want to put their time and effort and thinking into producing these forms. The assets, the visual and audio assets, are expensive to produce. And actually you need a significant amount of assets if you are to put a good story in place. So this is again very expensive research. And also the stories themselves ought to have a considerable length such that there is time for the interaction mode to be ingested and used freely, and for that onboarding process to happen naturally, and then also for the member of the audience to relax in the space of story, such that then when you evaluate the way they perceive it, you get more robust results. So hard and expensive to make tools, hard and expensive to make productions. Why on earth I've chosen to do work here, I don't know, but I was lucky to work with fantastically talented and enthusiastic people in industry as well as in academia. We got some good money to do research, and I think we've pushed the state of the art forward to some extent. So that is the end of my presentation. And if you're interested, Cutting Room, the software, is freely available on GitHub. If you don't catch it here, write me an email and I'll give you the address. I'll take a snapshot. 1, 2, 3, snapshot done, bang. And my acknowledges to DC Labs, University of York, XR Stories, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's there. Not quite everybody, I beg your pardon, and industry, but some acknowledgements to those who invested money in this research. Thank you for your time and patience, and I'm sorry for the 2 hiccups when I was interrupted, so I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Marian. Don't worry about the interruptions. I was fully expecting a cat or a dog or a small child to create a third interruption. So that was fine, and a really interesting and really clear talk. Thank you for a really excellent exposition. So
thank you.
Do we have some questions? Charlie T, would you like to speak your comment here? You've put something in the chat, or would you like me to speak?
No, I can speak if you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you. Yep, we can hear you.
So yeah, sorry for the truncated name. It's Charlie Turner. I'm
Right.
an engineer, a human factors engineer. My question's really about how to relate this to engineering. I'm a big fan of storyboarding, but it does have its limits. This seems a much more immersive and potentially useful approach, but where would I use it is really the question. So if I'm engineering, or if I'm working on the engineering of a complex socio-technical system like an aircraft or a spaceship or whatever it is, where in the engineering process would this tool be best employed?
Oh God, Charlie, you got me there. Let me try to think, because indeed the inspiration for us or the target for us is entertainment. Before moving to engineering, I want to say this paradigm of interactive storytelling is not far away from interactive tutorials. So you could use it in I don't know, education. You could use it in presenting. A colleague of mine, Jonathan Hook, is using this paradigm in presenting, say, counseling young people who have been identified to have cancer, ovarian cancer, and provide richer material that would allow them to understand better the impact upon their lives once they receive that. So there is a variety of other domains where your information space is rather complex, and then you give threads of navigation in that complex information space to the stakeholders. Now, when you say engineering, if you have a large engineering team working on an aircraft design, I believe there are misunderstandings, there may be points of miscommunication.
Always.
So as documentation, you could, so a static object that seeds what they are to do, what their examples from the past, examples of good use, in a more or less metaphor that I've presented earlier. You know, if I get to an item that for which I need more detail, I take it. If not, I move on. But I think without much tweaking in concept, it could also be used as a communication tool once the project is working. But again, a lot of care needs to be had, because you don't, particularly it's a safety engineering. If safety is an aspect, then one needs to be even more careful to use an interactive tool rather than really simple and
I'm wondering if it would be good for training people, because the more complex your system is, the more complex the training, and to make it real life and to give people all the scenarios that things that might happen that they have to fix, say fault finding. This could be really good.
That's clear.
I can see that, for example, in a training situation or a design situation, if you get to a point where there's something critical and different things can happen, then it would help you go down the different routes rather than in storytelling perhaps picking one route. In this instance, I don't know, I'm just thinking of the famous aircraft crash in the UK a long time ago. I think the right engine has failed. What are the different things I can do, and what are the consequences? Go down the different paths to explore them.
We actually have been approached by police as well to stage events and then to allow various decisions to be taken and then see their consequences.
Michael, you've got your hand up.
Yes. No, I was just going to add to that, because we have currently under development, currently being tested, a role play exercise. I'm not sure how much of the detail I can give away, but basically trainee radio producers with a series of decisions to be made. So it's an audio exercise about being a radio producer, and with a cartoon, basically, drawings as the visuals. So lower cost production, I think, than Marian's aiming for. But that then gives you a series of decision points. Would you do this or would you do that? And then gives you feedback at the end. And what strikes me is if you look back over the history of AI, the expert system, which is you'll still find employed by your GP sitting there in the consultation to help, a series of questions. Where does this get you to? And that can get you to a diagnosis in the case of the NHS system, expert systems, or is it worth drilling here for the oil industry? Is one of the famous sort of old expert systems. And I think in those terms, there's a lot that we can do if you have the knowledge base to actually create that. And I think it's the difficulty that Marian has faced in looking at fiction, in effect, is that you have this you have a sparse set of data, you have a sparse set of ideas. Your writer writes linearly and creates a pathway. Whereas if you're looking at factual and documentary, then quite often you have a whole collection of knowledge that you tap into, and therefore that you can explore. And I think that's where we've found. I mean, we have the sort of Discover Your Demon, his Dark Materials trailer that Emma Nuttall and others produced with BBC Creative a few years back. That looks like an expert system round the back, but that's quite intensive because it's a branching tree structure. And I was just going to just for giggles, of course we know about branching tree structures called Choose Your Own Adventure, and the books even come with the structures outlined on the back. So there are various ways, and I think one of the interesting things is how you narrow down the number of choices, or at least the number of nodes that you're producing for, but increase the depth of the story, as it were, by other details.
And also knowing what choices are bad choices and lead to bad outcomes. It's a good thing.
Well, yes, and that's a really interesting debate that we have, as in how, because we're mostly looking at factual, how much information should you give up front to enable a good decision? Otherwise, you're doing the sort of Charlie Brooker thing, which is no really idea what you're doing here. And it was explained to me.
I beg to differ.
One of my colleagues, that you're the strange voice in his head.
He had a good idea, actually.
We've got a question from Liz.
So, Marian, so we're really talking about stories evolving live throughout the production. And I mean, it's just really a statement when you mentioned that you're interested in collecting and collating that feedback as they watch the production and grouping it somehow based on the feedback. And I just wondered, obviously there'll be different strategies for doing that. Would you group together people who were positively responding to the content, or positive and negative, and therefore to create debate? I just wonder how you would manage that. I mean, obviously you're talking about some sort of sentiment analysis of how actually what they're communicating, but have you thought about how you might group it? That's my interest.
I think you have the answer in your question, Liz. Thank you. I don't know now at the outset. Of course, you'll have to test various strategies and see how you engage, because the purpose, the objective would be clear, to keep the debate going and keep the people absorbed in the story. And then you have to spice up the debate with maybe negative points. You have to have an overarching theme, so to cluster around a theme that everybody, you have bigger problems that you don't want people to become obnoxious or aggressive, or so you have to regulate that. I only know it at the top level, like as a desire, as an aspiration. We would be able to brainstorm some strategies to cluster discussions, but how, I don't know. It would be definitely a part of the research.
And so obviously you would end up in some sort of a situation where you would have almost a conductor of overseeing it, moderating it.
Yes, yes. So you could have a conductor in real time and features that extract potential elements of danger and present them to them. So, yeah.
And of course, in line with good HCI, we would let the user choose as well, whether they want to be in a more confrontational exchange or whether they would rather have a more passive exchange.
Exactly, yes. And it is a story, perhaps you don't want to take them too much out of their relaxation. And it's very much, I think, whatever you do, it would be highly contextualized to the story you tell. Probably you may take some basic understanding, but not much of the method may be ported elsewhere, unless you tell exactly a similar story.
I think it's got a very powerful application in the young cancer sufferers, but I think that's where the conductor would be really important, because you could lead to some catastrophic outcomes as well.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and I just went through the comments, and my colleague from our school here at York, Martin Suckling, who is a composer, said, "Marian, I'm always looking for cacophonies." So I should not use that term, more or less derogatory. Sometimes a cacophony is it's needed or desired.
Thank you so much. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you for keeping the video on, because you nodded, and it's reassuring to also see members of the audience agreeing with the points.
I'm very sympathetic to black squares with white names. It was horrible.
I have a kind of question. I think I'm really interested in how this changes the process of creating the stories. And you talked about how Charlie Brooker found it really hard, but with time, I wonder whether this opens up different ways of creating stories, which could be really stimulating for the creators. And have you thought about doing, like, people go off and do 1 week creative writing workshops to have a fairly intense long period of rethink the way you're writing a story, not doing it linearly. And I was remembering, I'm always struck that some authors say that when they start a novel, they have the whole thing plotted out in their head, particularly, say, detective writers, and other writers. I think Ian Rankin says when he starts writing, he has no idea what the story's going to be. So people do it really differently.
Yes, yes, Helen. It's again very, very, very well posed question. We have done in the past hackathons. We have done 2-3 days tutorials with. Normally, these hackathons and tutorials are younger people who want to develop their art in new areas. And yes, they are meaningful. That's from them. I draw the conclusion that it takes an awful long time to kind of develop a new way of thinking. And graphs or branches is easy to visualize, put post-it notes, what have you, and a tool that it's easy to work with. As soon as you make a step forward and provide something more complex, then the learning curve is much bigger, the onboarding is much bigger. So my preferred way of working is in dedicated projects with one production company who drives something. And for that you need an investment of 30 to 50K at least to have something like a 10-minute long experience. And that's more rewarding, but also almost always I think I've explained this 10 times and they still don't use them. And the last one, What is Love? I think I rewrote the script at least 20 times. I rewrote it and I'm not a writer. And I push back and they'll come back. And when things that I needed for interaction, I've put in thinking, okay, the writer sees it and develops that. And they'll take them out and it comes back linear. And I think so... I'm kind of sound like complaining. It is rewarding work, and I'm also I'm more kind of curiosity drives my science. And no, that's not the curiosity replaces my science. So I've not documented well these processes because I just want to get the things done. But yeah, I think
that's because you're proposing a real paradigm shift.
Yes.
And the other thing I thought is I think you're proposing a really interesting and important paradigm shift. And like many of these things, soon, I hope, it won't be the killer application, but the killer example will come along and everyone will say, oh, okay, that's what it is.
Yes. That was my hope for the past 20 years. Yeah. BBC has done some really great productions. again, I say it, Netflix beats them all because it is more kind of, it was consumed by far more people than the others. But and the games industry, they move much closer to storytelling, and there are some beautiful pieces there as well.
Any other questions? Because I realize time's moving on. So I think we will thank Marian for a really inspiring and clear talk. And the big disadvantage of Zoom meetings is showing our appreciation. So if people would like to turn on their microphones and give a clap.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I would clap myself as well. And you, thank you for your patience.
and
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for coming. And we have another talk last Monday of November from Grace Eden. And of course, I can't remember what the topic is, but I will circulate information. And then in December, we're going to talk about HCI and the pandemic with a number of mini talks. So information will be coming about that. So thank you, everybody. And some thank yous coming up in the chat for you, Marian.
Yes, and thank you for giving me the platform, Helen.
Oh, thank you. Great. Okay.
Bye.
And the recording will be available in a few days.
Super.
Right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.